All right, welcome everybody. Thanks for being here. My name's Nathaniel. This is Cougars Care Managing Stress and Anxiety. So hopefully that's where you're meant to be. Welcome everybody that's in here in person. Also welcome everybody online. Thanks for being here. We're going to spend the next hour, maybe hour and a half together today. Hopefully teaching you some skills that you can use for yourself or for other people to help them manage their stress and anxiety. So we're going to do some, next slide please. First, I'm just going to talk a little bit about like what anxiety is and what stress is and how we can really tell the difference, right? And really the important part is to know when we need to kind of seek more professional help and when we can kind of just like fall back on managing it on our own. Then I'm going to teach you those 3 exercises like I just mentioned. So I'm going to teach you a grounding technique, a progressive muscle relaxation technique, and a decatastrophizing technique. And then I'm going to end with an ad for the counseling center because that's what they pay me to do. So that's what our time is going to look like today. Next slide, please. Those of you that are here for soda credits or for extra credit or for whatever credit that your professor sent you or whatever, that's great. Hopefully you still will learn something. Hopefully you still will like this, but if you don't, no skin off my nose. I want to talk about the difference between stress and anxiety. I've been using those words oftentimes already. You might think those words mean the same thing. They kind of do, but at the same time, they kind of don't, right? And when we use them in their technical sense, when we use them in a psychological sense, stress is that everyday feeling that we might feel, that normative feeling. And anxiety is when that stress pushes over into an area where it's going to make us significantly struggle to function in our day-to-day, right? And so if you have test anxiety, right, and you're initially scared like this little cartoon here, but as you get into it, as you start going, you let the nerves go a little bit, you're still a little bit shaky, but you can get through the test, right? That's the kind of stress that is pushing all of us when we go and take exams, right? Next slide, please. But if you have test anxiety to the point where like you're just not able to function, right? You start trying to do it. Maybe you don't get the first couple questions right. You start freaking out. You just give up and you turn in a half blank test to the professor and run out of the room so you can cry when nobody can see you, right? Not that I've ever done that, but I have. That is when we're pushing into anxiety, right? That is when we're moving from a normative stress response that can be, even empowering sometimes to something that really needs to be taken care of in some way. Next slide, please. It can be similar like if you're doing a presentation, right? If somebody is nervous, but you settle in, right? I've been doing these workshops now for 7 years. And every time I come and like I'm sitting in the first 15, 20 minutes before the workshop starts, I'm like super nervous the whole time. And I'm like not exactly thinking straight. I'm like clicking on all the wrong buttons, freaking out about how to do the Zoom. For instance, today I didn't do the slides right, apparently. But then as I get into it, hopefully I relax a little bit. Hopefully I don't look like I'm super duper nervous right now, right? And so that's that normative stress that pushes me to try and do my best, right? That pushes me to try and put my best foot forward. But next slide, please. If I instead like get overwhelmed by that stress to the point where I just like hide in the bathroom instead of coming back and doing this actual presentation, right? That's the anxiety thing, right? So you get that? I think I'm belaboring the point a little bit. Stress, good. Anxiety. Okay, next slide, please. I've got one more example here. If you're freaking out about checking like the locks on your doors all the time, checking them a couple times, normal. Checking them 10 million times, not so normal. Next slide, please. So yeah, but I think I've already belabored the point. So why does this matter, right? We talked about grades a minute ago. We talked about class, right? That's really why this matters, right? Inevitably, the reason that you're here at APU is to get an education so that you can get that career, so et cetera, right? And so in the last 12 months, our most recent data, over like something like 81%, I think, of folks have endorsed being overwhelmed at least one point. Anxiety clocks in at about 60% have endorsed being anxious at least one point, right? And those things can move on towards hopelessness, depression, even suicidal ideation, right? And so those things are obviously going to interrupt your ability to do your work, right? To get the grades that you want. But also like, I'm a counselor, like I'm a licensed clinical psychologist, so I don't really just care what your grades are. I do want you to succeed, right? But I'm concerned even just because of these things, right? The well-being aspects in and of itself, right? And in the end, you're all people. Yeah, you're students. Yeah, you're here for grades, right? But we don't want to treat you just like you're some kind of like robot that like we input textbooks and you output scantrons or whatever, right? That's not the vibe that we want to go for here, because that's not going to be conducive to you putting your best foot forward. Next slide, please. So I want to teach these coping skills now. Hopefully everybody got the whole spiel. Everybody feels good as to why I'm teaching you all of this. Let's go into the tools that you can use, right? And I want you to think first off, right? Like you probably already have some tools to manage your stress and anxiety, right? And all of those tools, they're going to work better in some situations than in other situations, right? Some people call this like the toolbox metaphor, right? What are the tools that I have in my toolbox? And so you're going to use a hammer on a nail. You're going to use a screwdriver on a screw, right? So the different types of stress and anxiety that you feel, you might use different tools. You also might find that your stress and your anxiety are different from other people's, right? Everybody's a unique individual. Everybody's going to get more or less worked up about certain things than other things, right? And so we want to make sure that whatever we teach you, like, can be practical and useful to you. So I'm going to teach you 3 skills right now, 3 skills I really like, 3 skills I think can really benefit you, but that doesn't mean that each one of them is going to equally benefit you. And maybe none of them do, right? If none of these benefit you, hey, shoot me an email after this and say, hey, Nathaniel, all of your skills are terrible. Like, I need you to teach me some more skills. I have way more skills that I can teach them this. I just don't want to put more than 3 in this workshop. Otherwise, we're going to be here for forever. And I want you guys to get out and enjoy your Friday afternoon. So we're just going to do 3 for today. But know that these 3, it's okay to just connect with the ones that you connect with. It's okay to lean on certain ones, and different individuals might like different ones better. Next slide, please. One of the reasons that we might like different ones better is because our anxieties are different. And even when we talk about anxieties, I already told you, like, stress is one thing, anxiety is another thing, right? We can also differentiate anxiety from panic, right? So maybe you've felt panic before, maybe you haven't felt panic before. Maybe you felt it to like a moderate extent, or maybe you've had a full-blown panic attack, right? But when we talk about panic, it's when basically we're so anxious that it overwhelms our entire like capacity to cope, right? And then we start like feeling symptoms almost like we might even be having a heart attack, right? Most people that have a full-blown panic attack, the first time they have one, they go to the ER because they're like, am I dying, right? Like, because that's a real feeling that you can get, right? But even if you don't have that full-blown panic attack, you can have these feelings of like getting so anxious that you're really sweaty, that you start trembling or shaking, right? That your hands might feel numb, or your fingers and toes, right? Or you might feel like your heart is skipping a beat, or that your chest is tightening up real tight, or that you can't catch your breath, right? Even if you can breathe, right? You might start hyperventilating, you might start getting dizzy, right? This is a unique type of anxiety that is called panic. And because of that, we have to deal with panic in a little bit different ways, right? If any of you have ever had a panic attack and somebody just sits down next to you and goes like, hey, I took like this yoga class one time and they told me to do box breathing. So I'm going to have you just take a deep breath in and out right now. And then your panic attack will be solved, right? That's not going to work. And you're going to be very annoyed at that person, right? Because while breathing exercises are really useful for dealing with some types of anxiety, they're not useful for dealing with panic, right? Because panic is when we're totally overwhelmed, and we need to use different skills when we're totally overwhelmed. Next slide, please. So how do we cope with panic? We cope through what's called grounding techniques. Show of hands, how many of you have heard of grounding before? Okay, actually more than I had anticipated, so that's good. More and more people are starting to learn about these things. I also saw that many of you did not raise your hands. Don't feel bad, that's pretty common, right? Grounding techniques are a subsection of relaxation techniques, and they don't focus on those like relaxation breathing, all that kind of stuff. They don't focus on like physically relaxing your body. What instead they focus on is like your sensory experience, and they try and mess with your attention, right? You all know that your attention is a limited resource, right? It's hard for you to pay attention to me right now, maybe. That makes sense. It's certainly hard for you to pay attention during like those long class lectures, right? Or at the very end of your day, or when I was in school, it was my 1:30 class was always the hardest, right? That was when all of our first afternoon classes started, and like you were full from lunch and you just wanted to take a nap, but you couldn't. You had to go sit through like biology or chemistry or whatever. Those are always the hardest because you can't pay attention. So, did I leave my marker over there, Yosley? Thank you very much. So basically, when we have a panic attack, and this is going to be hard for those of you online to see, so I'm going to say what I'm drawing as I'm drawing it. When we have a panic attack, our symptoms go up, 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 and they spike at some certain point where we begin panicking, where we can't deal with it anymore, right? And then usually, once you panic for a while, it takes a lot of energy. I don't know if any of you have had like a freak out and then afterwards you just need to take a nap, even though all you did was sit there freaking out on your couch for 2 hours, right? Like, it should tire us out, and we shouldn't be able to maintain that for very long. Our panic attack should go up, freak us out, we should run out of energy, and our panic attack should go right back down. The problem is, if we focus on things that are stressing us out, right? So if we focus on whatever happened in the past that made us start to panic, or whatever we're worried about will happen in the future that might be causing us to panic, or even once you're having a really bad panic attack, you can start like thinking internally, like, am I having a panic attack right now? Like, is my heart supposed to be doing this? Like, am I okay? Why is my hand doing that then? Right? If you start focusing on things, that's where you devote your attention. Then instead of going up and coming right back down, our anxiety will go up and then it will persist so that it takes longer and longer until it finally drops back down to normal, right? And so that's because you're using your attention in a way that's actually increasing the intensity and the duration of your panic attacks, right? And so with a grounding technique, we want to focus our attention on something that isn't going to make us stressed out, right? We want to focus our attention on basically nothing, right? Because if we're paying attention to basically nothing, we're just going to have that first pattern I spoke about, where it goes up and then just comes right back down, right? And then we're minimizing the harm that the panic attack could do to us by shortening its intensity and duration. Making sense? Feeling good? Blank stares? Cool. I'm going to keep going. If people have questions, feel free to ask them. So the most simple grounding is called 5-4-3-2-1 sensory grounding, right? This is, if you've heard of a grounding technique, this is the one that you've heard of before, right? And it's where I just go and name 5 things I can see around me right now. So 1, I can see this water bottle, right? This water bottle is black. It's got a beautiful counseling center logo on it. I can also see this pen. It is also black and white. I can also see my folder. It's got a sticky note on it. The sticky note's got a little wobbly bit on the corner where I didn't stick it on so good, right? None of these things matter. You didn't care about my water bottle or my pen or my folder, right? But if I'm naming those things that I can see around me, I'm engaging my visual attention in my surrounding area, and none of this scares me. This water bottle doesn't cause me to panic. This pen doesn't cause me to panic, right? And so if I can focus my attention on naming 5 things I can see around me, then my panic might go down a little bit, right? If I can name 4 things I can feel around me, I could feel this water bottle. Again, it's kind of cold to the touch, right? Because it's not a good water bottle, so it's not insulated too great. So you can feel the cold water that's inside of it. Things I can hear, right? I hear the air conditioning.
To do with how your
Hear the person talking on the Zoom. I hear people gently giggling about the person talking on the Zoom, right? All of these things, they're taking my attention away so that I can reduce the intensity and duration, right? And then you could say, 3 things you hear, 2 things you smell, 1 thing you taste, right? You'll notice that I'm trying to involve all 5 senses here, right? And it doesn't actually matter if you do 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, if you forget the order of them, or if there's not a lot of sounds happening around, or if you don't taste anything because you're not eating anything, right? That doesn't really matter, right? What really matters with this is that you engage as many of your senses as possible, right? So I've given you a handout, and Yoselin, if you can send that handout to the folks online as well. My grounding skills handout says grounding exercises on top, right? And this is a front and back list of 16 different grounding techniques. There are many more. This is not an exhaustive list, right? But you see that all of these have something to do with trying to engage your attention and more often than not, trying to engage your senses. So in a minute, we're going to get back into groups and I'm going to ask you to read through these and identify which ones you think could work for you, right? Because they're not all going to be the same. There's a music one on here that a lot of people like. I particularly like, splashing water on my face or like coldness, right? That's why I have, again, this cold water bottle here. Drinking cool water helps me. But you may find whatever ones help you, and that's good, whatever they are, right? So we're going to go through those and we're going to share, think, pair, share, basically, in a minute. But if you could go to my next slide, please. I want to talk about that, just put that in your back pocket right now. I want to move on from talking about panic to talking about anxiety, right? We covered panic, that's like the biggest anxiety you can have, right? But let me take it a step down to regular anxiety, the kind of feelings that you're feeling here before you hit that spike, before you hit that trigger for the panic attack, right? In those spaces, distracting your attention is not necessarily going to help you that much, right? Like you could think, if you're not in the middle of a panic attack right now, and I just told you, hey, name 5 things around you that you can see, that's not going to make you unstressed. That's just going to make you annoyed, right? Because that's not the kind of thing that you need if you're starting to feel stressed, if you're starting to feel anxious. That's only the thing that you need if you're starting to panic, right? So what can we do about anxiety? Since that's what we're going to be feeling more often, right? That's the precursor to panic. We're going to be in that space more often than we're going to be in a panic space. Well, what we can do is, if we think about it from cognitive behavioral perspective, right? Basically, if any of you have taken your Psych 101 classes or things like that, you may know about like Aaron Beck and people like that, the cognitive revolution. If you don't know about that, don't worry, there's not a test in this class. It's fine. But the idea is that cognitivists say the way you think about things matters, right? So if you are starting to get anxious, you're going to tend towards a pattern of thinking called catastrophizing, right? So you probably hear the root word there, catastrophe, right? When you're catastrophizing, you're making anything that's happening to you into the worst possible thing that you can imagine, right? That's called catastrophizing. If you fail a test, for instance, and you're like, that was not good. I feel pretty stressed out about that. I'm going to need to do better on the final. Okay, you're stressed. But if you fail that same test, you go, oh my gosh, I failed this test. I'm going to fail this class. I'm going to fail out of college. If I'm going to fail out of college, I'm going to fail out of life. If I fail out of life, I'll be just like, a failure forever and all my life is ruined for a horrible, awful forever, right? I made it into a catastrophe, right? And you can tell that that doesn't make sense. As I'm talking to you now, you can tell I'm being ridiculous. And I am being ridiculous on purpose to prove a point. But when we are anxious, I guarantee you've had thoughts like that, right? Thoughts that are illogical, but they're emotionally driven, right? To go to that catastrophizing place, to go beyond the point and to like really push into some kind of ridiculous territory, right? You could do the same thing like if you're at a party, right? And you say the wrong thing, and then everybody is looking at you, and everybody heard you say the wrong thing, and everybody hates you now, and you're going to die alone, right? That same thing is not real, but we've all felt that social anxiety before, right? Some of us more than others, right? But we've all been to some extent there, right? And so this is kind of what we call a cognitive distortion. It's like putting on like anxiety-colored glasses, right? And so what we want to do is try and challenge that catastrophizing. And this is where my next handout comes out. I have a decatastrophizing handout. We'll teach you decatastrophizing. Ta-da! Next slide, please. Oh, that was weird. The title just came on the slide. There we go. So you can use this, and there's this is a front back, or some of you might have a staple version. There is a front where you talk about like what you're worried about, and it can ask you through some questions. How likely is it that this thing that I'm even freaking out about is actually going to happen, right? Maybe it's not even actually that likely. How awful would it be if this did happen? Am I realistically representing how awful it would be, or am I exaggerating how awful it would be? And what if it is as awful as I think? How would I survive, right? Could I make it through that, right? And you might think, no, of course I can't. But if you think about it a little more, no, maybe I could. Maybe I could figure it out, right? And so these ideas help us get a better handle on whatever we're dashed by. I don't want us to go all the opposite way. I don't want us to think that everything's sunshine and roses, because like your life won't always be sunshine, right? Sometimes things are going to be bad, right? Sometimes bad things will happen, or sometimes scary things will be approaching you, right? What I want you to do when we're talking about decatastrophizing is get focused on the right amount of stress that you should have in a situation so that your stress level is appropriate to what's going on, right? Instead of blowing it out of proportion, instead of moving from that normative stress all the way up to that clinical anxiety, and maybe even from there all the way up to a panic attack, right? So there are a bunch of little questions that you could ask yourself here that could help you with decatastrophizing. All right, 2 handouts down, how are we feeling? Makes a little bit of sense? Okay, great. But the task I'm going to give you right now is back to the grounding techniques. Which of these grounding techniques looks like you? You know, read that list that I had in front of you. Which ones do you like? And share it with one another, right? Because also by sharing it with one another, we know in the psychological research that helps us remember it better, that helps us make the behavioral intention for the next time we're panicking. So if you can take me to my next slide. My next slide is going to be on progressive muscle relaxation. So it probably is as it sounds. It's going to be muscles that you're relaxing. We're going to do it in a progressive fashion though. So that means like sequentially one after another, right? But let me explain why, right? Behaviorism, this whole idea comes out of the school of thought of behaviorism and that style of therapy. And from a behaviorist perspective, right, we are all like a product of like the things that are happening to us and like therefore the behaviors that we present, right? And so one of the innate human behaviors that we have is called our fight or flight response. You may have also heard it's better called fight, flight, or freeze response as well, right? Because sometimes we'll also find ourselves freezing up in incredibly difficult situations, even situations where we think like, oh, you know, like I should have run away or I should have fought back or whatever. Sometimes you might just freeze up, right? Because that is your body trying to preserve itself, right? Fight, flight, or freeze is a deep wired, like adaptive behavior for us to survive, right? And you can say that's evolution, or you can say that's how God created us. I don't really care about where it comes from, but we know that that's a big piece of what it is to be human, right? And this is really good if you're confronted by something you could fight, flight, or freeze, right? You know, if a bear is chasing you, like run away from the bear, please, right? You know, if you're in a situation where, you know, you need to like fight to get away from something, like do that, right? You know, but we know that it doesn't always work, right? Very commonly we see like, we heard the phrase deer in the headlights, right? Well, I grew up down here in Southern California in LA area. I don't see that many deer on roads, but some of you do come from places where you have seen them before, right? I've seen most of the other smaller animals freeze in the middle of the road. And what unfortunately happens, right, is those animals get hit by the car, right? Because you can't stop a car. Freezing doesn't like protect you from the car seeing you, right? You know, it's not an adaptive response in those spaces, right? And so sometimes our body's trying to help us because we're really stressed out, we're really anxious. So we start getting into this fight or flight response, right? And are literally like, you know, your breathing increases to increase the oxygenation of your blood, like your eyes dilate, so you take in more information, right? Your heart starts beating faster to get that blood circulating. Your muscles tense up to be ready for action, right? All of those things, your body is trying to help you, but that's not going to help you have that conversation with your mom. That's not going to help you pass that chemistry exam. It's not going to help you like resolve the issue that you're having with your partner, right? Like that's a totally different type of help that you need, right? And the problem is the more we have this fight or flight response, especially in anxiety, we typically run, right? We typically avoid whatever it is that's scaring us, right? And when we do that, we feel better, right? Because immediately you're not around the thing that scared you anymore, right? If you avoid that test by like literally not showing up to class, yeah, you're going to regret it later, but in the moment, you're going to feel really good because you didn't go to class and you're not stressed out, right? If you avoid that necessary conversation you need to have with a parent or with a partner or with a friend, right? You're going to feel good because you're not going to be scared by having that conversation. But in the end, the problem is going to keep going, right? And you're going to get more and more scared and more avoidant as you continue to learn that that's the only way that you can handle your stress, right? So from a behaviorist perspective, the way that we need to deal with anxiety is that old cliche, face your fears, right? What you need to do to solve your anxiety is go confront that thing that's making you anxious, go confront it head on, right? But that is really easy for me to stand up here and say. It is really hard to actually do in the moment. If it was easy for you to do, you would have just already done it. And you wouldn't have need me up here to say, oh, go expose yourself to your fears. It's called exposure with response prevention. It's a great psychotherapy technique. Go face your fears, right? You don't need me to tell you that. You're all smart, capable individuals. You all would do that if you could. But sometimes it's too hard for us to get ourselves there because we're too stuck in that fight or flight mode. We're too much focused on getting away from whatever it is that's scaring us, right? Well, this is where any kind of relaxation techniques. I told you before that it's really annoying if your friend tries to tell you to take a deep breath while you're having a panic attack, right? But a deep breath can actually help if you're in that anxiety phase. You're not in that panic attack, but you're in that anxiety phase. Sometimes you could do what's called diaphragm breathing, right? Deep breaths in and out, right? If you were here for my depression lecture last week, we did some breathing exercises, right? But I don't want to do just a breathing exercise because all of you can download Calm, all of you can download Headspace, right? There's a lot of these apps, like you already probably have heard of breathing exercises. So I'm going to teach you a different relaxation strategy. When you can't get yourself to take that deep breath, when it's really hard to start out with just relaxing, right? Because if I just walk up to you and say, hey, you're anxious, relax. Hey, stop that. Don't be anxious, right? That doesn't work either, right? Sometimes we need to get like a running start into relaxation, as it were, right? And that's where progressive muscle relaxation comes in. Next slide, please. So, okay, this is just instructions. Sorry, I don't know the exact order of all my slides sometimes when I get going and get excited. So progressive muscle relaxation, the idea is you're going to tense up your muscles first because it's really easy to go tenser, right? Especially if you're anxious. It's really easy to get more anxious, more tense, more stressed out, right? But it's really hard to just let it go, right? So the idea with progressive muscles, you tense muscles so that you can then unclench them and sort of swing into a more relaxed state than when you start. This sounds weird. This sounds confusing. That's okay. I'm going to model it for us right now. We also need to stop the screen share so that they can see me a little bit better on the Zoom. I think that little red button. Perfect. I know you still can't see me that great, but here I go. I'm going to do my best, and I'm going to talk us through as we go. All of you in here, hopefully you can see me a little bit better. I invite you to just sit wherever you're at. I'm going to put my marker away. Go ahead. If you want to close your eyes, you can, but you definitely don't have to. We're going to start by taking a deep breath in and out. And then I'm going to start by trying to tense my leg muscles by basically lifting my legs and pointing my toes back at myself, right? It's hard for you guys in the back to see, but I'm literally lifting my legs up and tightening all through my hamstrings and my calves as tight as I can, holding it without hurting myself, and then releasing it down, let your legs go floppy back to the ground, right? Hopefully feel a little bit of difference. This time we're going to do it the way that you typically do it. We're going to do that same motion again, but I want you to inhale as you tense all of your muscles, then hold that tension as tight as you can without hurting yourself. We're going to hold it for a few seconds, and then we're going to exhale as we release and let your legs go back floppy again, okay? So ready? Tense all the muscles, tighten, breathe in, hold it, and release. Let it flop back down, relax, kick your legs a little bit. Feel that difference. Do you feel the difference in those muscles that you just tensed up? Hopefully those ones, as you lean back in, you feel a little bit heavier now. You feel a little bit, more relaxed, right? And probably not necessarily a lot, but a little bit, right? And that's because we're swinging into this, right? Okay, we're going to keep going. I'm going to call out different muscle groups as we go along. I'm going to sort of explain what I'm doing, but also you can just like look at me. So we'll do the legs one more time, breathing in, tensing up all the muscles in your hamstrings and your calves, pointing your toes back towards your face, and relax, breathe out, let your legs flop back down to the ground, shake them out a little bit. Now we're gonna go on to arms. You're gonna pretend like you're like flexing here, tightening up all the muscles in your arms, holding it as tight as you can without hurting yourself. And relax, then fall to your sides, shake them out a little bit. Feel the difference. Hopefully feel a little bit more weight, a little bit more relaxation, a little bit more stretch. Same thing again, big breath in. out. Now we're gonna do like your like glutes and your core, right? So tighten up all your core muscles, tighten up your butt, basically breathe in and focus. And sit back down, relax, sink back in your chair. One more time, same thing, tighten up all those core muscles. Breathe out and relax. Now we're gonna do like the upper back and shoulders, basically by pretending you're gonna touch your shoulders to your earlobes, basically. So tightening up like this, looking real weird, that's okay, we're all doing it together. Breathe out, roll them out, relax. Same thing again, shoulders up towards your earlobes, tighten up all those muscles in your upper back and shoulders. Roll them out and relax. A little more than halfway through. We're gonna do now like your neck muscles by basically taking your right ear and touch it to your right shoulder so that you're stretching the left part of your neck. Breathe out, roll it back to the center. This time go the opposite direction, left ear to left shoulder, stretching that right side of your neck. Breathe out, roll it out. Two more for you. Like sort of all the tension you might be carrying in your head and scalp. Pretend like you're super surprised. Basically, like lift your eyebrows really high. Try and like tighten up this space through here. Breathe out. One more time, the most surprised you've ever been, most skeptical you've ever been, whatever makes you raise your eyebrows really high. Breathe out. And we're gonna do all this little tension that you feel throughout the major like bits of your face by you just ate like the sourest thing you've ever tasted before. So scrunch up your lips, scrunch up your eyes, scrunch up your whole face, tighten all those muscles like this. Hold it and relax. Gonna work out your jaw, blink a little bit. One more time, last thing, same facial muscle tightening. And relax. Now we're gonna do 2 more breaths in and out. And as we do them, shake out any tension you still got, whether it's still in your shoulders, whether it's still in your feet. I don't know where you still got it. It's all up to you. Take a deep breath in and out. Last one, deep breath in and out. All right. Thank you for going with me on my progressive muscle crusade. Hopefully everybody feels that a little bit, right? You feel a little bit more, hopefully you feel a little bit tired, right? Hopefully you don't have something important that you want to make you super tired. So sorry, grab some coffee, I guess. But like feel that differentiation in your muscles. Feel the way that you are more relaxed. And think about that the next time you're struggling to get yourself to just relax. Think about that idea of swinging back to more tension so that you can swing forward into more relaxation, okay? Everybody feeling good? All right, like I said, I always end these with an ad for the counseling center. So when should you seek more help, right? Basically, we've been talking about this a lot already, but like when your stress starts turning into anxiety, and when you start having that anxiety for long periods of time, or when you're starting to have severe panic attacks, right? That's when we know like you need help, right? So try and use some of these techniques we talked about. They should be useful to you. They should be helpful, right? But if they're not getting you back out of that chronic anxiety, if they're not getting you back out of that panic, then maybe we need to do some other stuff, right? And fortunately for you, you have access to 100% free HIPAA confidential counseling services for the entirety of your enrollment here at APU. That's literally where I work. You've literally already paid my salary through your tuition dollars. So thank you for that. I really appreciate it. Please come use this benefit. We're over in the Shire Mods. Next slide, please. Next slide. Next slide. We're over in the Shire Mods. This is Magnolia Court. This is basically like across the street from the In-N-Out. For those of you that don't know East Campus very well, this is what used to be sophomore housing. Now there's some juniors and seniors in there too. But come check us out. It's past the baseball field. This is Magnolia Court because there used to be a magnolia tree here. That died, so they planted this tree. That tree died, so they ripped it out. But there are still these bushes here. I can confirm that if you come see us today, you will see all these bushes. You will see our wonderful health center folks on the right. So if you ever need any general health care, they're available here for you as well. And we're over here on the left side, our door. That way, all of your health related stuff can all be in one spot. Please come check us out. Next slide, please. This is not that relevant, but if somebody is in immediate risk to themselves or others, don't come to the counseling center, call 911. But again, that's not really what we're talking about today, but just so you know. Next slide, please. And this is the last bit here. Again, I have it scheduled for a breakout group, but I don't want to do another breakout group. We've done a lot of breakout groups. I want you to think right now, just make a mental note or even a physical note if you've already got note paper out. What's one thing that you learned today? Because if you learned something new, that means you should try and remember that because it was new. You don't need to remember the stuff you already knew, right? And then what's one thing that you want to do this week, right? Maybe it's like a grounding exercise you want to take away from this. Maybe it's I want to do that progressive muscle stuff. Maybe it's none of those things, but I inspired you to start journaling or something like that. Make one promise to yourself. It's Friday. We're going into the weekend. Do something to take care of yourself. Does that feel good? Everybody okay with that?